presentation on the 13th district of Paris, which is a lesser known neighborhood to tourists, with a focus on a couple of points of interest: the charming little neighborhood of La Butte au Cailles, and also le quartier chinois, which is the Chinatown in Paris. So I will let James introduce himself and get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be back with you. Thrilled, actually, to be back. So I'm James Minette. I'm Victoria's brother, and I'm also a resident of Paris, and I've been living here for most of my life. So you could say I'm a Paris enthusiast. And today we're going to explore a district that's often overlooked by Parisians, which is the district around the Place d'Italie, the 13th arrondissement of Paris. And full disclosure, it's not a neighborhood that I know particularly well. Victoria and I wanted to do something different. It's the fifth Balade Parisienne, and we wanted to not necessarily shake things up, but kind of maybe explore new things, go to other places. And we decided to explore the 13th because it's a very lively and interesting and culturally diverse environment. But because I'm not an expert, I'm not going to guide you as a tour guide. What I'm going to do is we're going to do a thematic exploration of the neighborhood, which of course reveals a lot of things about the neighborhood, but also reveals a lot of things about French culture, about French society. So it's so I'll be talking about the neighborhood, but also showing you things and maybe focusing on maybe a broader picture of how these different elements sit within French society and what it reveals about it. So also, I haven't had time to write my notes, so I'm going to read a lot more than I used to. And if I get a little flustered, please bear with me. It's just emotion to be back with you. So let's first of all, where are we? So we're really far away. Wow. I'm a real Parisian. So for me, La Place d'Italie is practically Mars. It's so far away from me that it really is another part of the city, another part of the country. But if you see the pink arrow, that's where you are. So it's where UU massage is. I did a screen capture of Google, and for some reason it showed that. So sorry about that. It's UU massage is not a big, a big source of attraction for the 18th, but that's what it decided to show me. So so if you remember, we started the first exploration was in this neighborhood. So really on the other side of the city. Then we went to the 5th, so not far away. Then we went to the 19th, which is over here. And then we did, last time we spoke was when we went up the Rue Montorgueil. So now we're really going to another part of the city with a very different energy, which even though I don't know it that well, I find very interesting because so different and so distinct within the Paris experience. So it really is an atypical. So it's a neighborhood full of contrasts. It's an atypical neighborhood. It's located. So originally it was located along a river called Bièvre, and it was a district of butchers, tanners, and dyers. So if you know anything about the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, is that those professions, those trades were considered less than agreeable because they smelled they had a very strong smell. So they were always, shunned and pushed to the outskirts of a city. And that's what basically the 13th was. It was considered the outskirts, like really the place where nobody wants to live. Nevertheless, when the river, I think for sanitary reason, was covered in 1910, those artisan shops disappeared and factories took over. So big factories like Renault, etc., which attracted large population of working class of workers and their families. And what happened at that time is that when you had big factories, you had housing projects that were developed to house the workers. So that's what basically the neighborhood was all about. And in the 60s, like for a lot of European and cities all around the world, there was this need or this willingness to destroy the old, what was considered decrepit or in disrepair, and just build new projects, new parts of the city, and really create new cities within the cities. And that's really like this very, like a strong focus of 1960s and 1970s architecture, which now with the retrospect of, and in hindsight, we feel was, a little overwhelming and not that aesthetically pleasing. So, so we'll see the architecture a little later, but so it specifically in that part of the city, which you really don't have in the other parts of Paris, a lot of big, massive architectural projects were developed. And in less than 10 years, most of the 13 arrondissement was populated with big residential towers. I think also that one of the objectives of these projects was to house as many people as possible. There was a population boom in France, and you needed a lot of housing. So the solution was high rises, which was something fairly new in Paris and still exceptional. There are really very few high skyscrapers and tall buildings in France. So you have two very distinct environments, atmospheres in this neighborhood. You have this what's left of the old neighborhood and what's completely new. And what's very interesting there is like they really cohabit neck to neck. So it's very interesting. So what it lacks in architectural cohesiveness, I think it has in incredible diversity and energy. So so it's not really like, as you can see, it's not the usual promenade that we used to do. We have two stops. We're going to go to a place called Butte Cailles and another place called the quartier chinois. Quartier chinois means Chinatown in French. And we're going to, for each of these places, we're going to explore different themes. So at La Butte Cailles, we're going to talk about something that we've explored many times in Paris, this idea of village-like atmosphere. Like it's something that's very specific to Parisian life, this desire, this dream of going back to like a more rustic past. And at the same time, it coexists with like one of the most urban expression of art, street art. And there's a lot of street art in the 13th, and it's really a wonderful way to liven up, to give cohesiveness, to bring color and to bring energy in the neighborhood. The quartier chinois we're going to explore a little bit Asian cultures in Paris. The Asian cultures have been part of the Paris history for a long time for many different reasons. And within the Asian cultures, you have this presence, this overwhelming presence of modern architecture with the good, the okay, the functional, and the great. But we'll see. So I'll try to really show you different things. So let's start. Okay, and before I start, sorry, as this is it's more of an exploration, and I'm not here as a tour guide. If you want to ask questions as we move along or give a comment or maybe give your own experience of something similar, please do, because for me, I would like this to be more of a conversation between all of us than necessarily me being a tour guide that shows you this and that. So La Butte Cailles is like Montmartre, like the quarter around Butte is very famous for its village-like energy. Small alleys, tiny houses, little cafe. It's a beautiful place to discover, full of charm and authenticity. La Butte aux Cailles takes its name from a certain Pierre Cailles, who owned a vineyard in 1543. To be honest, I tried to find more information on Pierre Cailles, but wasn't able. I don't know what he did with his vineyard to get the name of the Butte, but probably he was a prominent figure within the community there. But there you go. Initially, the district belonged to Gentilly. So Gentilly is a town outside of Paris, just in the south of Paris, but it was attached to Paris in 1860. So this already here you have this feeling like it was already kind of outsider neighborhood. It wasn't prime real estate. So it kind of lived on its own elsewhere next to Paris. So La Butte aux Cailles, so we're going to see later what happened with these quarters that were transformed with buildings, etc. So it's a completely different environment. But La Butte aux Cailles was just next to it, lucky to remain untouched by the massive urban projects of the 1960s. Today, it's just, as I said, directly next to the modern buildings of the Presidenti, creating a one-in-a-kind urban contrast. It's still very working class, although it was charming, it was working class. And it really is since the 90s, thanks to significant renovations and a lot of gentrification. The Butte aux Cailles has become very trendy without losing its genuine ambiance visage. So it's really, if you live in the neighborhood, it's really a place to go and you're going to have a nice time without this. And it's going to be trendy. You're going to eat well. You're going to meet interesting people, but it's always going to feel like you're inside a village. It feels very separated from the rest of the city. So also something very characteristic of La Butte aux Cailles is a lot of colors. If you know a little bit Paris tends to be very beige because of the Haussmannian buildings, which tend to be extremely uniform. Here you have like color comes and is very much part of the identity of the neighborhood. So here, Rue Crémieux, which is a small, I cannot stress how small it is. I think the photo gives it more depth than it actually has, but it's charming. The houses are tiny, again because they were working class, so very modest architecture. Here, a little more high end, like with definitely like a 1920s, 1930s feel. Here, what I like here is like it's also colors, but like more pastel. I find it it's very always surprising to see houses with colored facades. Like Paris tends to be very beige, very gray in terms of colors. So it's like, it really is like a breath of fresh air when you see these wonderful, vibrant and contrasting colors. I think it gives it a lot of personality. So here you have this, so it's called a crenelated facade. So what I liked in this house, it's like a tiny house. It's practically a dollhouse, but it's extremely ornate with like motifs made of bricks with this like crenelated facade, and at the same time with extremely simple materials. This is brick and very basic stone. So again, you feel the tension between sophistication and like the more working class heritage legacy. So also something that's also very characteristic of this neighborhood is like there's you see green everywhere. Vegetation is really part of the experience. Everywhere there's a garden, like there are trees everywhere, flowers everywhere, courtyards with a lot of plants, and tiny houses. All of it is very charming and very personable. So sorry, the picture isn't great. Another characteristic you have of this neighborhood, but not necessarily around here, like in all of the neighborhoods that are on the outskirts of Paris, which were traditionally working class, you have a lot of these strange architectural projects, things that seem out of place where they are. So here you have La Petite Alsace. So I don't know if you know what Alsace is. Alsace, which is it's a French region, which is in the eastern part of the country, which has a very strong German heritage and a German personality. It was first German, then it became French, then it became German again, then it became French again. So it really is a part of the country that's really a little bit on the fence in terms of culture. And they are known for these extremely German, Swiss-looking houses. So they're about, how many pavilions are there? Sorry. 8, yeah. So it's tiny, but it's extremely charming. And again, these are tiny houses, maybe like 1 or 2 rooms. And they all sit together. The architect is fairly famous, Jean Valter, was working on behalf of l'habitation familiale, which was an organism in charge of developing housing for working class populations. So it very much is a social project of the 1910s, 1920s. And a lot of those very strange, very unique architectural designs come from this the social policy of the French government at that time. So another picture. So it's a little less charming here, but it really, you see the details a little more. It really sits kind of its own, isolated within the neighborhood. And the next picture shows how the contrast within the different architectural sites, the lack of cohesiveness. You have these Alsatian chalets surrounded by very modern kind of generic buildings. And not to say that's the only that's the only trait of the neighborhood, but it's definitely something that you see a lot in the outskirts of Paris, this lack of urban cohesiveness, which can be both a good thing because it allows a lot of diversity and plurality in the experiences, but it can create sometimes very I would say disconnected experiences. So interesting in terms of what it says about the experience of Paris and the history of Paris. So another cité, so again, I think it's very much everywhere in the world, this idea of creating within the city, small cities, inside of the town, small towns. So this here we have the Cité Florale, which is, so it's more it's not, here it's not an architectural project. Each house was developed separately, but I think in the 1920s, the people decided to, I guess, unite or become this private neighborhood, which you can still walk around and walk across, but they are run as one town. So, and they chose in terms, I guess, because they liked flowers or they liked gardening, but in terms of identity, they chose this idea of being the Cité Florale, so the flower city of Paris. And it's a nice place. It's not like a botanical garden. You're not going to see extraordinary flowers, but everything is always, there's a lot, it's very, very green, and it feels very lush and full, and it's very isolated, and it feels practically, it's very quiet and very very pleasant, very, very calm. So the characteristic, why it's called also La Cité Florale, is that all of the streets bear the name of a flower. So Rue des Glycines is wisteria, Iris, which is iris, Rue des Liserons, which Victor told me was weeds. So it's it's like the flower that that blossoms out of the weed, something like that. I'm not a big flower expert. I'm not very good in gardens. Sorry. So Rue des Orchides, Rue des Volubilis, Morning Glory, and Square des Mimosas, Mimosa. Really, it's this idea of very cute, very charming, really quaint, and like it feels very English, where it's like feels like an English neighborhood with like English lawns and like this ultra big focus on gardening and the cuteness of things. And when you see that it's surrounded by buildings, it does create this strange contrast that's both, it's interesting, but a little unsettling. So let me just show you around. So again, it really feels very English. You feel like you are in a very posh neighborhood of London with a lot of green, a lot of greenery, a lot of cats, of course, cats. It shows how pleasant and quiet it is. He looks very at ease and at peace. Villa des Glycines, I really like the lettering, which is reminiscent of Art Nouveau, which shows also that this neighborhood became what it is in around the 1890s, 1900s, and little courtyards. And you can see in the perspective, you can see buildings. And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this idea of contrast, of diversity is really prevalent in this neighborhood. And I think that's the key to understand it and enjoy the neighborhood. It's the lack of uniformity. Again, that's a beautiful picture. Comment tu dis lierre? I forget the word. The ivy. Sorry, I couldn't remember the word. In French, it's called hier. Hier. So the ivy, it's just beautiful, knowing how difficult it is to keep it in that way. It really is remarkable. You can see the energy and the intentiveness of the residents on this on their character in preserving their characteristic around this idea of flowering and gardening. So also here, it's interesting because these are very atypical houses for Paris. This is not even like really like French architecture. It looks more English or Northern. It's I was trying to find more information on who developed the project. I have the feeling it's like what happened here. A lot of artists, maybe intellectuals, kind of like getting together and building like a community together. But I wasn't able to find really like the history of La Cité Florale. But I find it very interesting because it seems so different from the rest of Paris, and both in terms of architecture, but also in terms of energy. So we're end of theme one, and I think we can agree that it's charming, but it's something we've seen in our explorations in our promenade of Paris. This idea of small houses, kind of like looking for a more rustic, a more intimate experience of the city. And what I like here is that within the Butte, you have something for me that is completely contrasting, is this idea of an extremely urban, cosmopolitan art, street art. So I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of street art. I think it has become fairly, people recognize it and understand it. So it's definitely that art that is created, that lives in the street, that's born in the street, and it really is created by artists for city people. It really is created in public locations for the benefit of all. So for a long time, it was unappreciated. I remember and considered illegal. I remember when I was young, this idea of, when you had graffitis, all of that was considered such it was considered an act of vandalism, practically. And to see like the change in society regarding this type of artistic expression is, I think, very interesting. So it was long unappreciated and considered illegal, but now it has become recognized and is very popular. And I think a lot, not just in Paris, but I think throughout the world, a lot of municipalities and cities have discovered that it really is a great way to inject a more brighter, a more colorful, a more engaging urban experience. And that's what we're going to see, because we're going to see a lot of color, a lot of huge frescoes that really bring a district, an environment that we bring it to life. And also there's some very, very famous artists, Space Invaders and Mystique Art Parisian. I think Shepard Fairey is not French, but he's still very well known, very famous, and they enjoy international fame and recognition. So I tried to find the reference for each of these pieces of street art. Unfortunately, I was always able to find it. So I apologize for the lack of reference of some of the street art I'm going to show you. So this is probably the most famous fresco in Paris. You find it in the 13th arrondissement, 186 Rue Nationale. So, and this is the expression of the three pillars of French society, this idea of liberty, equality, and brotherhood, fraternity. Those are the principles of the revolution, and they are very much still today, even though we know that it's a complicated and sometimes not very, a lot of people don't experience it as much as others, but it really is still something that really runs deep in French experience and in the collective unconscious of French society. And the idea of really putting it on the wall of on the facade of a building is really, I mean, it's a fantastic message. It's a fantastic piece of art, and it's also like an explosion of color and hope. And I think it really, you can see how generic the building is. And unfortunately, I'm going to show you architecture, but the reality is that most of the buildings in the 13th are similar to that, very generic, not that attractive. So putting color, putting messages, and putting life on it, it really is a fantastic idea. This is for me my favorite mural. It's like, or actually it's more than a mural, it's a fresco. I love the way that it creates, first of all, it plays on the perspective and on the structure and on the surface of the building. And again, you see how, I mean, a little sad and how depressing the building is in of itself. And just by adding on this art, this color, these messages, it really changes completely the environment. So also, I think one of the interesting things about street art is that it's a very reactive type of art. It is very immediate. It's also often extremely young, and it's a great way to express ideas and thoughts in a very immediate manner, and to engage the audiences and the people living in the district in a conversation about certain ideas. So here, obviously, a fresco, or maybe more like a mural on the war in Ukraine, and I think it was just created like a few months ago. So it really is very fresh, and I think that's also something very interesting with this neighborhood. It's very young. It's very, I wouldn't say it's not working class anymore, but there's the word populaire in French, which is not popular. It's not, but it's populaire. It's middle class. It's middle class. So it gives it a lot of, flexibility and a lot of plasticity. It's a neighborhood that's constantly changing, and it's willing to change. So there's a lot of expression and a lot of willingness to say things and to express messages about our environment, about society. And I think you really feel the heart of French society when you are in neighborhoods like that. I just here it's more aesthetic. I think it's a fairly beautiful picture. I think it's spray painted, but it's very delicate and it has a very kind of enigmatic quality to it. I would try to find the reference, but I wasn't able to. I apologize. So here you have two things. You have
James, we have a little question.
Sure.
Linda would like to know if there is a difference in the population who inhabit these contrasting areas.
Yes, definitely. You're going to have more culturally diverse people. The 13th is, if you're living in Paris, it is one of the most inexpensive areas of Paris. So you're going to, and you have a lot of high rises. So there's a lot of housing available. So you're going to have a population that's usually more diverse, less privileged, and more where it's easier for people who are, let's say, in artistic or intellectual endeavors to find housing. And so I guess the neighborhood inspires them, and they reflect it on the neighborhood itself. So it's a virtuous circle, and I think that's why you have so much creative and artistic expression, because it's a district that has a very diverse type of population. And of course, it sounds very idealized, and I'm sure very diverse neighborhoods can be tough to live in. But I think you have here what it brings to a neighborhood to have cultural diversity, dialogue, expression, and then willingness to participate in the community, which you really don't have in the center of Paris or in the western districts of Paris. You have a very usually much older, very affluent, usually very I would say non-diverse population. So not that much diversity, and therefore not that much dialogue. So I think you really have something that you don't see then in many other places in Paris. You certainly don't see it in the 18 where I live. You don't have the type of expression, that type of those murals, this constant creativity being expressed. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show you, because this is, I think, fairly distinctive of this neighborhood in terms of Paris experience. So here you have this is not specific to the 13th. Those are stencils. So it's like spray paint with stencils. And it's that's a very famous artist called Mystique. And I remember her when I was much, much younger. You could see her stencils everywhere in Paris. So, and she passed away, unfortunately, since, but I think she was one of the first street artists to really reach, I wouldn't say like an international fame, but at least to become famous and to become recognized, and also to become like a reference within Parisian culture. And you have, of course, so there are a lot of very famous street artists, but probably the most famous Parisian street artist is called Space Invader. I don't know if you've heard about him. What he does are mosaics that are modeled depicting aliens from the arcade games such as Space Invader, Pac-Man, Super Mario Brothers. If you remember Atari, those were like extremely pixelized little creatures. And in the 80s, he started I guess, gluing or sticking on facades of buildings these little aliens, and it became a common occurrence. Like it became something that you would regularly see. It was very enigmatic because to this day nobody knows who he is, nobody knows his name, and he never explained it was never explained. You don't really know what his project is. So it became like this very enigmatic presence within the city, where you would see these little mosaics without really knowing what it was. And it became such a, and generated this cult following where people would actually hunt the different mosaics, and it became a game to know exactly where all the different mosaics were located. So it became very much part of the street culture of Paris. And now it's become a little more gentrified. Now it's in museums. I think maybe 5 years ago, made his hunt like they were just like, I think how would you say, like he made his 1,000th contribution to Paris known, because it's never inaugurated. He's just leaves a message saying you'll find something in this location. It's never explained. It's just indicated, so he just made it known, and it was a big thing. There were like a lot. There was a lot of press, and to this day we still don't know who he is, and we really don't know what are his profound motivations. Nevertheless, his creations are visible in 79 cities in 20 countries. I think 5 years ago he was hired by the city of Hong Kong to, I think, create over 500 mosaics that were how do you say, like spread out all over the city, and so it's very I mean it's a very singular, specific experience of Paris, and it's a little difficult for me to explain it because it's been part of my life for so long that it feels odd just like explaining it as it is. So I hope you kind of understand what I'm trying to say with Space Invader. It really is it's a Parisian icon. So you have other different ways of showing. So it's usually sits next to the name of the street, and it feels very enigmatic. It feels like there's no rhyme or reason to these different mosaics, but it has become part of the urban folklore of Paris. So here you have, it's a little bit everywhere. You see them, you still see them. At one point they were taken down, and now they're being kept as they are. They're considered part of the Parisian heritage. And I think this is a very bad picture, but I think this is in Hong Kong. I think this is in Hong Kong. So you see how it can either be very discreet or turn into like a real fresco. So an interesting artist, very enigmatic. It's a little difficult to explain what he does because, to be perfectly honest, I don't understand that well, but it really is. And next time you're in Paris, you should really look around and try to identify them and discover them. So as usual, I wanted also, we're doing an thematic exploration, but I don't want it to be completely conceptual. And I want to still give you a few addresses where you can find either good food or interesting products from the city. So here, that's a very good restaurant. I mean, I probably had dinner maybe like twice in my life in this neighborhood, but like one of them was in this restaurant, and it's excellent. Really, it's excellent. La Bonne Mère. So it's like 22 Rue des Moulins des Prés. I think that it's in the Butte Cailles. So it's really a must-visit seafood. There are not that many good seafood restaurants in Paris. You find seafood at the brasserie, but restaurants that focus on seafood are fairly rare. So really, if you are in Paris, this is a must discover destination. And you can see, the seafood is just so vibrant in this picture that it makes me hungry, to be perfectly honest. Really, I feel like, it's so, I have the feeling I can just like grab it and eat it. But really, definitely worthwhile discovering. And another, so you know that one of the leitmotifs of our explorations or promenade are the open markets. They are such a such a fundamental staple of French Parisian life that when you are in Paris, you have to experience it because it really is it is for me the most typical face of our aspect of Parisian experience. And this one is fantastic. The ones that I've showed you until now were okay. They were, and because by okay I mean they were nice, but they were fairly a little limited. This is it's very large. They're just like it goes on forever and ever and ever, and you find any type of produce, any type of food, any type of meat, any type of already made food. All the cultures are represented in the marché Auguste Blanqui. I would say it's affordable. I wouldn't say it's inexpensive, but because you are at the 13th, it's let's say it's less expensive than other marchés. So you can really have a good time there. It's a great Sunday excursion. I mean, it goes on for like, let's say miles, but it really goes on for a long time. So before or after, well, actually before, because the market will only be open in the morning. So go to the market, find things, and then go explore la Butte aux Cailles. It's just it's located at the bottom of La Butte aux Cailles. So it's really a great experience. So let me show you a few photos. So seafood, wonderful, like a fishmonger, wonderful. Olives, so that's like North African, wonderful, large. So you also have flowers and beautiful vegetables. And that's really like the wonderful, I mean, like it really is a wonderful place to be surrounded by so many great I would say food items. You can also buy wine. You can buy flowers, and you can find some, and sometimes there are clothes that also are sold, but those are less nice. So we talked about Ambiance Village, street art. So I think two very different ways of experiencing La Butte aux Cailles. Sometimes something very rustic and something more artistic. Now we're going to explore quartier chinois, so Asian cultures and modern architecture. So when I say next to the Butte aux Cailles, it's just exactly next to. So you can see already in the picture that the urban landscape changes dramatically when you go from La Butte aux Cailles to the quartier chinois, and you're really only walking about 100 meters. So it is very disconcerting. It really is a striking contrast between the two, and you really don't have the type of contrast in Paris. Paris is fairly uniform in terms of architecture, with a very specific and very, I would say, controlled urban project. Here, you really have the feeling that completely different people developed this country, and it feels like you're really in two different cities, not parts of the city, but two different cities, two different experiences. And why is it called the quartier chinois? Because when the neighborhood was developed in the 1970s, the first population that moved in, or to be perfectly honest, I think was willing to move in, was the Vietnamese and Cambodian communities that had immigrated from Southeast Asia after the end of the Vietnam War. So why did they move to Paris? Because, and that I don't know, I just, watched, I guess I should, there's a slight problem in my presentation. Let me just go to the slide I wanted to show you. So why do we have a Vietnamese community in Paris? Because, and that's, I don't know if you know that, because French colonized Indochina from 1863 to 1954. I think it was part of the great colonization project of European countries in the
You are at the 45-minute mark.
I know I know you were going to tell me that. So I will, so just to note that the Vietnamese and Cambodian had strong French culture, and they had that they had been part of Paris for like a long time. But in the 70s, after the war, the end of the war in Vietnam, they moved, like a huge part of the Vietnamese and Cambodian community moved to France, to Paris, and they moved in the quartier chinois. So now in the 90s, there was more of a Chinese immigration that came to Paris, and since then it became quartier chinois, because quartier chinois means Chinese quarter, Chinese district. So let me just give you like some flavor of Chinatown or quartier chinois in Paris. It's not like San Francisco. It's not that impressive. I mean, it's not that decorated. It's not that ornate. It's fairly discreet. It's really focused on the Asian-owned businesses, but it has a lot of flavor, and it's very distinctive in the experience of Paris. So you have Asian motifs everywhere, and now it's very much, although the Vietnamese really founded the neighborhood, now really the Chinese community have taken over. So it's more of like a Chinese experience going there. So one of the big draws of the neighborhood is around the Chinese New Year, the Nouvel An Chinois, which is really one of the best experiences you can choose to experience the district. So let me just show you a few pictures. So obviously the dragon, which is the symbol of the New Year in Chinese culture. A lot of parades. It really is charming. I would say it's impressive because it's only been recently it turned into like more of a tourist and a real event. I think the Asian community was always more focused on being discreet. Now it's showing a lot more of its colors, being a lot more visible. And in the last few years, the New Year's, the Chinese New Year's has really become like a real cultural event for both the Chinese community and the Parisian community living next to them. So you can see, it's very colorful. In French, you say bon enfant, and there's a good spirit. People are having fun. No, it's both very, it's traditional, but it's a moment. It's a moment of togetherness and sharing. And obviously, you can see there, they allow people from different cultures just to participate in order to show them the inclusiveness of the neighborhood. So. That's okay. I thought I had more pictures, but sorry. So we should go. So focused, another restaurant. This is very good. It doesn't look like much, but Vietnamese cooking is never highbrow. I mean, you're never going to find an extremely fancy Vietnamese restaurant. They're usually joints or small restaurants owned by a family. They don't invest a lot in decoration. That's not their thing, but the food is just absolutely wonderful. Personally, one of my favorite foods is Vietnamese food. I love Vietnamese. So if you've never eaten or tasted Vietnamese food, I would recommend waiting until you come to Paris, because really there's only 2 places in the world where you can get good Vietnamese food. Well, 3, obviously in Vietnam, that's obvious, but in Paris, and the other one is Montreal, because you have big Francophone communities in both cities. And that's where you get the Vietnamese communities and this wonderful, extremely fresh, full of flavor. It's wonderful. So you can see it's very simple food, but there's just like this combination of flavors, of textures. It's always kind of between like, it's like between salad and like a meat dish. It's like a combination of many different types of cooking that makes it really singular and very interesting to eat. Okay, so final Asian focus, tang frères. So that's really also a staple of Parisian life. The tang frères are actually Chinese Laotian brothers that opened like a chain, like a supermarket when they arrived, and it has become really part of the Parisian folklore. The tang brothers. Whenever you're looking for, it's like the Parisian lilies in Tucson.
That's
Really,
smart.
it is if you're looking for anything Asian, you go to tang frères. So it really is, and it's sprawling. You find it takes you forever to find anything, but it's a really and the prices are fairly, it's very affordable, very fresh. Unfortunately for me, it's very far from where I live, so I never go there. But I have a friend who lives at Place d'Italie, and he goes there all the time because you really have the best quality of food there. So very typical, very characteristic of Parisian experience at Pan Frère. So how much more time I have?
You have about 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's just finish on architecture. So as I said, it's like the 13th is in next to the Butte is a very modern, very urban, very modern district with a lot of, I wouldn't call them skyscrapers. They're more
high-rise
residential residence, high-rise residential residences or residential towers. It so it really makes it a district apart, at odds with I think the idealized version, vision or image or dream that people have of Paris as either as a village or as a museum, and it really completely contradicts those ideas. And I think it's interesting in that way that it shows that Paris can be something else than just old buildings or expensive houses. It can be middle class. It can be open to everyone, and it can be welcoming to everybody. So you have, and of course, that means that you have a lot of development, a lot of projects, and of course, some of them are nice, some of them are less nice. So so let's take a look at some of the architecture, some of the buildings that you find. So I focused on nice buildings. So you're going to see really nice architecture, because I'm not going to show you unattractive or uninteresting buildings, but know that that's just choice selection. You know, the reality is a lot more, it's less glamorous than that. So you have this, so this is at Place d'Italie, and that's Italy too. So the very, very famous, the prominent Kenzo Tange, who did, I think, a lot of incredible buildings around the world. He did the Terminal E at Roissy, you know, like the kind of like oval shaped terminal, which is wonderful. So he made this. It's an interesting building. The Italie 1 is like a mall, so it's a very fairly. It's not a particularly interesting experience, but the building in of itself is very interesting. So here you have, I would say, the other side of architecture and architectural projects. You have the Olympic complex, which was developed in the 60s and the 70s, and that's basically what replaced the old working class neighborhood. So basically, they destroyed everything and built this in the 60s and the 70s. So those are the areas where the Vietnamese and Cambodian communities moved in initially. So let's say it's a very different experience than what you have in Paris. It's not for everybody, but it's there. But it's really, that's definitely something you need to see, because you don't see that much in Paris, but you do see it everywhere else in the suburbs. But that's really part of a certain architectural heritage that I think you see in most European countries and European cities. And the Olympiade is one of the most, I think, prominent projects because it really is this very specific ideas that architects had in the 60s and the 70s of creating like a autonomous or like a self I can't find the word, sorry, like that like a self like a comment tu dis autonome autonomous city, sorry, I'm getting a little flustered in my explanation, so I hope it's still clear. But and by that I mean that and because I have a friend who lives in one of them, everything is interconnected. So you don't see it, but the supermarket, the parking lot is underneath. So when I go to his apartment, before going into the elevator, there is an entry for this commercial district. So everything is interconnected as if you could do everything without ever leaving the complex. I think that's what I was trying to say. It was just this idea that it's a city within a city. And that's something very specific to that time of architecture. I think we've moved past it. We've opened up things. It's a little more, it's more human, and I think a little more pleasant. But it's certainly something that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about modern architecture in Paris. So you also have these. So depending on your architectural taste, you can find it interesting or not. I find personally the building on the left interesting. The Tuileries is where my friend lives. He lives in one of those buildings. It's not very attractive, but I can tell you that the apartments inside are very nice. And he lives on the 19th floor, so he has an incredible view on the rest of Paris. And it really works like a city within a city where people never really have to leave and they can sit inside the complex all the time. It's I think it's a little antiquated vision of what life is, but I think was very much in line with the political and philosophical ideas of architects at that time. So here you have more really like what looks like a very typical urban landscape in the outskirts of Paris. There are a lot of very different buildings of different architectural style, but overall a certain cohesiveness, this idea of like smallish buildings with like a lot of terraces, a lot of flowers, a lot of open gardens where people feel, people are able to live a comfortable life full of fresh air and greenery. And also with affordable housing, because these houses are, these residences are fairly affordable for anybody. So they are a place where a lot of people have moved and are raising their families, and they're very lively environments. So you have here, it's more like this is more like a small architectural project, but I think is very striking in its own way. I think it shows also a lot of modernity within the district. It's a centre universitaire. I've never been there, but I see Jacques Ripoll is a very famous French architect. He used to work with Le Corbusier, so very much in that very modern, very conceptual vision of architecture. And it's one of the only buildings of his in Paris. So here you have two very different buildings. I like the creativity and the oddness of the shapes. I've never been inside of either of them, but still, what's interesting here is that you have a lot of creation. It's a place where architecture can be played out in this neighborhood. Paris is a very there are a lot of things, like because of there's so many old buildings and so much they're protected in terms of architecture. There's very little thing you can do. There are very few places in Paris where you can experiment architecturally. So it's interesting, whether you like it or not. I think it's always good to experiment and to try new things. And I think the 13th arrondissement is definitely a place where you see some incredible architectural projects. Whether you like them or not, I think it's a little bit beside the point. It's just nice to have them. You don't have to live with them, but it's nice to know that people are trying new things and keeping Paris alive in terms of architecture. So here you have the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which is like the big national library where you have, I don't know how many books, but I think hundreds of thousands. So there's 4 towers that are open like a book that that symbolize a book. And in each of these buildings are full of books. So it's a I mean, I wouldn't say it's a project that I love, but I think it's definitely become part of the architectural landscape. I remember when it opened, people were a little bit like perplexed and nobody really understood what was going on, but it has become, like all architecture, it becomes part of the experience. And it has, and it really also symbolized the transformation of this building. It was the big first architectural building. And since then, really the building, the neighborhood around the bibliothèque has completely transformed from like a fairly unpleasant, unwelcome neighborhood in the 80s. It has become this thriving and lively district with a lot of gardens, a lot of green. It's very young also. There's a lot of energy and a lot of young people live there. So we're just going to finish with this and these very odd buildings. So this is like probably the last big architectural project developed in Paris. So they opened in 20. Okay, yeah. So when did they open? I think in 2021. So you have the Tour Duo, and they were, so they're like, they were, so the architect who designed them is this very French, a very famous but very controversial architect called Jean Nouvel. He's very famous. I think he's done several buildings in France and all over the world. They're always very odd. To be perfectly honest, I don't think I really like these buildings, but they are probably the most significant, most distinctive architectural project you see in Paris. So there's the willingness of the Paris municipality to have more high rises in Paris. So they've removed the height limit of buildings in several districts located in the outskirts of Paris. I don't know exactly the details, but now you can, it is allowed, it's permitted to build high rises in the outskirts close to the périphérique. So the duo towers are, so it's one tower that's 100 meters tall with 39 floors. And it's the second highest tower in Paris after Montparnasse, which is 210 meters tall. And the second, which is much smaller, is only 122 meters tall with 27 floors. And there are, unsurprisingly, offices, hotel, restaurant, bar, panoramic terrace, auditorium, shops, green terraces. It's, I guess maybe I could open up the floor. What do you think? Do you like it? I have other pictures. So it was under construction, I think in 2019, 2010. It looks, and this is like, so I read that this is supposed to be, it's reminiscent of a bell. So it's actually a dialogue with the churches of Paris. I'm just repeating what I read. I have no idea, to be honest, but it felt within the framework of this presentation and the exploration, it felt interesting to end on this extreme modern, extremely perplexing, definitely not what you have in mind when you think of Paris, realization project, which I think is, which shows that Paris is a city that can be modern, innovative, and also able to adapt and change, which is sometimes, difficult when you are in Paris, and it's the same urban landscape it's been for a long time. So how do you adapt to changing to the transformation of society when you are like a city that wants to preserve its legacy and its heritage? So it's an interesting, I think, tension within the city, this idea of, do we modernize or do we keep things as they are? And I think maybe maybe an awkward conclusion for this exploration is that maybe it's in the 13th arrondissement that you maybe find a first solution of how things should be in the future for Paris, how Paris can move forward and still be a modern city, not just be a city that is just preserving and repairing, renovating the past, actually creating the future.
Très bien.
So, okay. So I hope it made sense. I think I got lost here and there in a few explanations, but to be perfectly honest, I finished the presentation 2 hours ago. So if it felt a little like he is improvising, I was. But I really like this way of doing things, because it's a different way of sharing Paris with you without being a tour guide, without giving. It's more like the broader picture and the broader themes, which I think maybe brings more understanding of what French culture and French experience is.
Très bien.
Oh.
Merci, James. So, I mean,
okay. Questions out of my.
Hold on. Yes, there are a couple of questions that popped up, so let me address these first. First of all, Liv would like to know if the 13th arrondissement, if you know this, has it been affected by the ongoing riots that are taking place in Paris, or parts of the country?
I don't know about the 13th. I can tell you that in my neighborhood and the center of Paris, it's been very, what's going on, and you feel that there's a tension, and there's been a few curfews, but really it felt, at least at first, like it was a part of another country. It was somewhere else. But it's not the first time we've had riots. And it's always been like that. When you're at the center, when you live in Paris, you live in a privileged area of the city of the country that's very protected from the rest, definitely the suburbs. So it's very easy to not feel anything happening if you're not interested. So I don't know about the 13th, but definitely the rest of the city, there was very little violence.
Okay, thank you for that. There was also a comment from Linda. She had asked the question about the contrast in the various areas in terms of the population, and she wanted to be a little bit more specific and give the example of the Alsace, the Cité Alsace, and the more generic modern areas. I mean, is there in those two examples a difference in population? I guess that's what.
No, so I don't know who is living in the little Alsace. I think it was more like I think it was more like an architectural joke in many ways. You had to do cheap housing. Oh, let's do Alsatian Swiss-looking chalets. I think it was more like, oh, let's do something different. I don't think it was to reflect cultural diversity. And I think at that time in the 1910s and 1920s, cultural diversity was definitely not the focus of French authorities or French municipalities. It was a very I guess a very French experience that you were trying to put forward. But in terms of cultural diversity in the neighborhood, I think you have a lot of Asian communities, but you also have a lot of North African communities, a lot of African communities, and they do all live. It's okay. It's still Paris. So even though it's middle class, we are not talking about underprivileged populations. There's still all of these the buildings. You still need to be still need to be a owner. You need to own and buy these spaces in order to be able to live there. Some of them is public housing, but most of it is they're buying their own space, their own apartment. I can't find propriété. They own their own
landowners.
They're home owners. That's what I was trying to find.
D'accord. So Linda, I know you're there.
Am I answering what? Please feel free to ask me the question.
Okay, she's staying on mute.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That answered my question very well. Thank you.
Super. Does anybody else have a question? If you do, raise your hand, press the mute button to unmute yourself, and feel free to ask a question. I don't see anybody raising their hand.
So I encourage everybody so I know that it's not, part of the areas one visits when one goes to Paris, but it really is interesting. Or maybe if you're invited there, or if you maybe want to go to the fish restaurant, which is excellent, maybe take the opportunity, maybe go there maybe a little bit before, so that you can explore and get the flavor of the neighborhood. I'm always struck by how distinctive it is within Paris. Kathleen, how are you?
Okay, Kathleen, you're on mute.
Je vais très bien, merci.
Merci.
What is your favorite area of Paris?
Oh, I think Montmartre. I mean, that's where I live, and where I've lived most of my life. So yeah, I like Montmartre. I like Montmartre.
Okay.
It's changed a lot. It's not as nice as not as easy to. What am I trying to say? It's not as simple as it used to be. It's more. There's just a lot of people. It's a very touristic district, and it has really altered the experience of living there, in my opinion. But maybe I think it's and I think maybe it's just Paris in general. It's a very especially right now, there's just a lot of people everywhere, and it's a very lively but very there's just a lot of energy, and it's a little sometimes difficult too much. It's a little intense part sometimes.
Thank you.
I think I'm not sure if Alfredo had his hand up in the air or nope. Okay.
Richard,
Okay, Richard.
I want to know, are the two towers, Duo 1 and 2, are they near Montparnasse?
Not exactly. So if you let me just go back. I have a map, so I can show you exactly where it is. Hold on. Okay, it's exactly here.
Oh.
There. So basically, all of this neighborhood. So we started here. So Les Butte is here, and all of this is a very modern place. So it was first transformed around here, and that's where you have the Chinese Quarter. But all of this neighborhood, that's the National Library of France is situated here, and all of this neighborhood is in less than it turned into, it was completely, there was nothing like 20 years ago, and now has become a city in itself. And so a lot of the modern architecture is situated just here. And so the Jean Nouvel building is here. So it's really,
And can you point out where Montparnasse is?
so, oh, sorry, of course.
See the-
Montparnasse is, where's Montparnasse? Montparnasse is here. So
Oh,
you've, so
d'accord.
Montparnasse is here. So you have the railway, the station here. And so it's Rive Gauche. And so because all of this were the tracks from Gare d'Austerlitz. So that's why it was fairly underdeveloped in terms of
And Gare
urban-
d'Austerlitz is also a train station.
yeah, it's a train station. So it was like very developed in terms of underdeveloped in terms of urbanism. There was just a lot of factories and plants, and it changed entirely with the opening of the bibliothèque. And since then, there's been a huge urban development around there. But it's always residential. There are few. They're not developing it into like a business quarter. It really is residential. So it's and it was initially to offer, I wouldn't say cheap housing, but affordable housing for a middle-class population. And a lot of people have moved there, and they've made a lot of investment in terms of infrastructure. The metro now is more accessible. There's a lot more things happening in order to kind of make this whole the whole neighborhood a lot more easy for the population in terms of sorry, I'm getting a little flustered, but
It's okay.
D'accord. Très bien,
Ça
merci.
marche, James. I think we get the gist of it.
sorry,
No. It's all good. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to ask a question? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and, say what you would like to say. I'm not hearing anything. D'accord. Très bien. So like I said, the
I would like to say thank
Yes.
you.
Sue, go ahead.
Sue.
hi Stu, how are you?
I'm great. And James, thank you. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. You're very kind.
Also
I mean,
very,
to be honest, I'm
honest.
I'm not making it justice. It was actually a very interesting presentation to create. I've learned a lot of things. It was there's just a lot of history in this neighborhood, which I was not expecting. I thought it was going to be, kind of not that interesting. And it's a very interesting neighborhood, full of life, full of energy, with a lot of all of the murals, all of the art, all of the buildings being built in this neighborhood is quite remarkable. And I think it was very interesting to create. Unfortunately, I didn't present it that well, but I hope you got the gist and the energy that comes out of it.
It was excellent. Is it safe to walk around this
Of
neighborhood?
course, yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're in a big city, so don't always be careful, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not unsafe. I would say I would be more worried to walk in the center of Paris
Yeah.
than in the 13th because it doesn't attract anybody. So you're
Yes,
not going to
right.
have tourists. You're not going to have the thieves and the violence that comes with, and nobody really it's very residential, so there are not that many places to go out.
Right.
So it's very, very safe. It's very residential. You see
Mhm.
kids and families playing and walking and enjoying life. It has a very quaint quality to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to
Karen.
reassure you, Sue, my daughter lived in the 13th for 10 years. And
Did she love it?
yeah, they started out in Olympiade, which
I
was
know.
very interesting. And then they moved not far from Tolbiac Rue
Yeah.
Tolbiac to a more, one of these like in where there was a garden with buildings
Yeah.
around it and it's a great neighborhood. I mean, there's so
It's
much to see.
It's a great advantage of being still at the you're close to the center of Paris, and it's fairly affordable. So you have great housing. There's a lot of money was invested in the neighborhood. So it's it's modern. It's in good shape. You can do a lot of things. There are a lot of activities, and they're very family oriented. So if you want to start your life there, it's the perfect place to do so.
Very nice.
James, I love
Thank
your
you. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
James,
Stephanie?
Yes.
it's Lucille here. I don't know where
Hi,
I'm.
Lucille. How are
Hi.
you?
Fine, thank you. The whole time of your presentation, I lived there for 6 months in 1968, and I'm wondering, was my metro Tolbiac when I lived in a high rise, no less?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I mean, if you were at Tolbiac, that's where you were. Yeah. Tolbiac
Okay,
was.
so the,
And can you remember how because it was probably very modern, but very sparse. I mean, sparse. It was little because
Yeah,
a lot of the
Well-
liveliness of the neighborhood was developed afterwards. It was pretty.
exactly. Exactly. I'd like to say that I lived with, it was junior abroad, and for 6 months I lived in the 6th arrondissement. And then I asked to be with a family because I didn't want to be in a pension anymore in the Rue Vauvin. So they put me in with the worst family on the planet. And it was Madame Dolce, who was 120 years old and had a piano completely out of tune and gave us canned macaroni every night of the week. But when we went away, like
Lovely.
to the Mont Saint Michel or something, then she would have a feast for her family. And
Oh.
then if we came home early, there was the
that
feast.
type of family. Okay, that family. Yeah, that's
So I have
I'm sorry.
interesting feelings about the 13e arrondissement, and I need to go back there because it will have changed enormously. I don't remember
it
those
changed a lot. It changed a lot because at the time I think it was the first phase of the development, and since
Okay.
then there's been like several other phases, and there's like more buildings, and they develop gardens. It's from more like an architectural project, it really became a city. It wasn't a city before. It was just high rises and concrete. Now it's more human now.
Well, thank you. I'm going to go back.
Yes.
You convinced me.
Stephanie, you got interrupted. Go ahead.
James, I love your ballades because I can keep up. And as my body wears down, I can still hear and see. And I love it. And I just wonder, where are you taking us next time?
Well, I don't know, because if you like this way of doing it, we can continue exploring things that I can build presentations without having necessarily the personal experience of the place of what we're visiting. Or we can continue. I have a few ideas of where we could go next. We could maybe go outside of Paris, maybe. I know it's Balade Parisienne, but it could be Balade d'Île-de-France. I was thinking of maybe going to Saint-Germain-en-Laye, which is a city about 45 minutes away in the RER. It really is a small village, but very chic, beautiful. It used to be like the royal residence of the kings of France before Versailles. So there's a lot of it's a town full of really interesting and rich history.
Very nice.
So
Great.
we'll see. We'll see. On va voir.
We will keep you updated, everyone. So I think this, so we were gonna wrap this up, everyone. Thank you for coming and participating in the 5th Balade. And I wish you all a very nice weekend.
Yes, thank you for your attention. It was great. Sorry about the flustering, but it was the emotion and the joy of being back with you that made me.
There you go. That's what it is.
There you go. There you go.
Merci beaucoup, James. Au
Super.
revoir.
Okay.
Très bien, merci.
Okay,
Au
bye.
revoir tout le monde.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Prochaine. À la prochaine.
À la prochaine.
Au revoir.
Salut.